When Elena Morales jumped off that train in Montana, she wasn't expecting to become someone else's bride by mistake. She wasn't expecting to be hunted by men in dark suits who wanted her dead for what she'd stolen. And she definitely wasn't expecting Dr. Gabriel Whitmore, a broken war veteran with gentle hands and haunted eyes, to stand between her and danger without asking any questions. But sometimes the best love stories begin with the worst circumstances. Sometimes two people running from their past collide exactly when they need each other most. This is the story of a woman who stole justice and a man who thought he had lost his honor forever. If you believe broken hearts can heal each other, smash that like button and subscribe for more emotional Western romances that will make you believe in second chances. Hunted nurse finds love with broken doctor hiding from his brother's betrayal. The Montana wind tasted of snow and secrets as Elena Morales pressed herself against the train car wall, watching three men in dark suits scan the Copper Ridge platform below. Her fingers clutched the leather document case hidden beneath her traveling cloak, feeling the weight of papers that could destroy powerful men or get her killed. 2 months since she'd taken them from the Consolidated Mining Company's office in Denver. 2 months since she discovered the truth about why 43 men died when the Silver Bell mine collapsed, including her husband Tomas and their 5-year-old daughter Sophia. The men hadn't spotted her yet, but they would. They always did. "Final stop, Copper Ridge," the conductor called. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She had two choices: stay on the train and let these hunters follow her to the next town, or get off and hope she could disappear into the crowd before they noticed. The decision was made for her when she saw Harold Brennan waiting on the platform, holding a sign with someone else's name. Miss Sarah Patterson, it read in careful script. Elena recognized him from the daguerreotype he'd sent with his marriage proposal letters. Perfect. Elena slipped her wedding ring into her pocket, lifted her chin, and stepped onto the platform with confidence she didn't feel. "Mr. Brennan," she approached the nervous-looking merchant with her most practiced smile. "Miss Patterson." Harold's relief was visible. "Thank goodness. When you didn't respond to my last letter, I worried." "The Postal Service has been unreliable," Elena said smoothly, accepting his offered arm. "Shall we go?" From the corner of her eye, she watched the three hunters emerge from the train, scanning faces with professional intensity. One of them spotted her movement and started forward. "Actually," Elena said quickly, "I'm feeling quite faint from the journey. Perhaps we could sit somewhere quiet." "Of course." Harold guided her toward the station house, concern creasing his features. "You do look pale." They'd barely reached the building's shelter when shouts erupted behind them. Elena risked a glance back to see the hunters pushing through the crowd, clearly having spotted their target. "Mr. Brennan," she said urgently, "I need to tell you something." "Miss Patterson, wait." Harold's voice carried an odd tone. He was staring at her eyes in the better light, his expression shifting from concern to something cold. "Your letters mentioned you were from Boston, educated in proper society." "Yes." Elena's stomach dropped as she recognized the look in his eyes. "They didn't mention you were... That is, I didn't realize." "That I'm Mexican," Elena supplied quietly. Harold's silence was answer enough. "I see." Elena straightened her spine, drawing on reserves of dignity she'd learned to cultivate over years of facing prejudice in medical training. "And this matters because... my business, my reputation..." Harold fumbled for words. "People in this town have certain expectations." Behind them, the hunters had reached the platform edge, spreading out to cover more ground. Elena had perhaps 30 seconds before they spotted her. "I understand perfectly," she said with icy calm. "You're a coward who makes promises he never intended to keep. Miss Patterson, please understand. My name," Elena said clearly, "is Elena Morales. And you've just saved me the trouble of discovering what kind of man you really are." She turned to walk away, mind racing through options. The hunters would find her within moments. Harold was already backing away, like she carried plague. She had nowhere to run, no one to turn to, and a document case full of evidence that powerful men would kill to suppress. "Miss Morales." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady, despite carrying an undertone of carefully controlled tension. Elena turned to find herself looking up at broad shoulders and storm-gray eyes. The man stood well over 6 feet, built like he'd been forged from mountain stone and seasoned by hard weather. "Dr. Gabriel Whitmore," he said, touching his hat brim, with movements precise enough to suggest military training. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Even facing away from the platform, Elena could sense the hunters closing in. Desperation made her bold. Dr. Whitmore, I find myself in need of employment. Do you by chance require medical assistance? Something flickered in his gray eyes. Understanding maybe or recognition of a fellow soul in crisis. As it happens, I do. Are you qualified? Trained in Denver General Hospital, 3 years experience in trauma medicine. All true, though she left out the part about fleeing with stolen evidence. The pay is fair, room and board included. Position starts immediately. His gaze flicked past her toward the platform, and Elena saw his jaw tighten slightly. I take it immediate departure would be advantageous. Very. Whitmore moved to collect what appeared to be her luggage, a worn traveling bag she'd never seen before. My wagon's this way. Elena fell into step beside him, trying not to look back at the hunters who were undoubtedly questioning Harold about the Mexican woman he'd been speaking with. Her heart raced, but Dr. Whitmore's presence beside her felt steady as bedrock. Thank you, she said quietly as they reached a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 bay horses. For what? For not asking questions. Gabriel helped her onto the wagon seat with hands that shook almost imperceptibly. Sometimes questions can wait until people are ready to answer them. They rolled out of town in comfortable silence, leaving Copper Ridge behind for open country, dotted with cattle and crossed by streams lined with cottonwoods. Mountains rose in the distance, peaks touched with early snow that promised winter's approach. Elena gradually relaxed as no pursuit appeared behind them. Whatever Dr. Whitmore's motivations for helping her, she was grateful to be alive and temporarily safe. Beautiful country, she said, meaning it. Has its moments. Winters are challenging, though. Some find the isolation difficult. I'm not afraid of solitude. Elena adjusted the document case on her lap, ensuring it remained hidden. Sometimes it's preferable to dangerous company. That earned her a sharp look. Gabriel studied her profile for a moment before returning his attention to the horses. What brings you west, Miss Morales, besides Brennan's letters? Elena considered how much truth to share with this stranger who'd inexplicably become her rescuer. My husband and daughter died in a mining accident 2 years ago. Denver held too many painful memories. When Harold's proposal came, starting fresh seemed wise. And now I'm grateful for employment that doesn't require marriage to a man who judges people by their bloodline. Something in Gabriel's expression shifted, a shadow of old pain crossing his features. I understand something about wanting to escape painful memories. They crested a hill and Silver Creek Ranch spread below them. Elena's breath caught. The main house was substantial but elegant, 2 stories of timber and stone, with a wraparound porch that spoke of comfort rather than ostentation. Outbuildings dotted the landscape: barn, bunkhouse, medical facility, corrals filled with fine horses. Everything spoke of prosperity earned through competence and hard work. But Elena noticed details that suggested recent neglect. Garden beds overgrown with weeds, fence rails that needed repair, an air of sadness hanging over the place like morning mist. How long have you lived here? She asked. Built it 8 years ago, started with medical training, determination, and very little else. And now I run 3,000 head of cattle breed horses and try to provide medical care to folks scattered across the valley. His voice carried pride, but it was tired pride. Not bad for a man who started with empty pockets and battlefield surgery training. They rolled through the ranch gate under an arch bearing a Silver Creek design. Dogs emerged, barking, tails wagging. A weathered man with kind eyes and graying hair came out of the barn, his face brightening when he saw Gabriel. Santos, Gabriel called. Dr. Gabriel, the man replied warmly, approaching with the easy competence of someone used to managing both animals and people. You bring a guest. Santos Rodriguez, Gabriel introduced. My foreman and the closest thing to family I have. Santos, this is Miss Elena Morales. She'll be providing medical assistance and helping run the household. Santos's face lit up when he heard her name. Bienvenida, señorita Elena, he said warmly. It will be good to have healing hands here again. We have needed this for too long. Gracias, Elena replied, touched by genuine welcome. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Gabriel lifted her traveling bag, movements still precise but carrying that slight tremor she was beginning to recognize. Santos will show you around. I'll take this to your room. The ranch house interior was well built, but clearly lacked a woman's touch. Good furniture arranged for function over beauty, clean but sterile. The kitchen was large and efficiently organized, the parlor comfortable but impersonal. Senor Gabriel, he is good man, Santos said quietly as they toured the ground floor, but very sad since the fever took his family. Very alone. Fever, Santos's expression grew troubled. 2 years ago, during his last tour at Fort Benton, scarlet fever outbreak, his wife Isabella and little boy Marcus. He shrugged helplessly. Dr. Gabriel, he was fighting Apache raiders at the border when it happened. By time he get word and come home, they were already buried. Understanding hit Elena like cold water. The tremor in his hands, the shadows in his eyes, the careful way he held himself apart. How old was the boy? Marcus was 6, bright child always asking questions about medicine and horses. Santos's voice roughened. After they died, Dr. Gabriel, he blamed himself. If he had been here, if he had not been at war. And now, better but not, how you say, whole. He works too much, sleeps too little, keeps people at distance because it hurts less than letting them close. Elena's throat tightened. She recognized the symptoms because she carried them herself. The guilt of survivors, the fear of caring again, only to lose everything. Perhaps, she said carefully, having another healer here will help remind him that sometimes we can save people. Santos smiled sadly. See, perhaps, but first someone must save him from himself. Elena's room was on the second floor, spacious and clean, with windows facing the mountains. Someone had left fresh towels and water for washing, along with wildflowers in a simple vase. Dinner was served in the kitchen. Beef stew with fresh bread, green beans from the garden apple pie that Santos's wife Maria had contributed. Gabriel asked polite questions about her medical training, her experience with various conditions, her thoughts on organizing care for scattered ranch families. Professional conversation, carefully neutral. But Elena caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, studying her with the intensity of a man trying to solve a puzzle. And she noticed other things. The way his hands trembled slightly when he lifted his coffee cup. The careful precision of his movements, like someone fighting an invisible battle. The way his eyes would go distant for seconds at a time, seeing something that wasn't in the comfortable kitchen. I'll need to visit the neighboring families, Elena said. Meet the children, assess common medical needs, understand what supplies we require. Santos can introduce you tomorrow. Gabriel's voice was steady, but Elena caught the slight hesitation before he spoke. Thank you. She paused, then ventured further. Dr. Whitmore, may I ask what made you decide to hire a medical assistant? The walls slammed down so fast it was almost audible. Gabriel's expression went carefully blank, shoulders tensing. Practical decision. Too many accidents, too many close calls with no proper medical care nearby. People deserve better. That's not the whole truth. His jaw tightened. Marcus was sick the night before I left for Fort Benton. Just a slight fever, nothing alarming. If I'd stayed home, if there had been 2 medical professionals available when the scarlet fever outbreak hit. He stopped, shook his head. Every child in this valley should have access to proper medical care. Every family should have someone they can turn to in crisis. You were following military orders. I chose duty over family. Isabella died calling for me, and I was 300 miles away shooting at Apache raiders who probably just wanted to protect their own families. His voice cracked slightly. Marcus died asking when Papa was coming home. Elena's heart clenched. This wasn't just about providing medical care. This was about a man trying to atone for perceived failures, honoring his dead by protecting the living. I'll do everything I can, she said quietly. Every family, every child who needs care. Gabriel nodded once, sharp and final. I should say good night then. Breakfast is at dawn. We have rounds to make tomorrow. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Elena watched him go, noting the military straightness of his spine, the controlled way he climbed the stairs. Later, lying in her comfortable bed, listening to the ranch settle around her, Elena reflected on the day's strange turns. This morning she'd been a fugitive running from corporate assassins. Tonight she was a nurse in a house shadowed by loss, employed by a man who built fortresses around his heart. But despite the sadness hanging over Silver Creek Ranch, Elena felt more hopeful than she had in months. Here was work that mattered. purpose beyond mere survival. And maybe if she was careful and patient, she could help heal the wounds that kept Dr. Gabriel Whitmore trapped in his pain. Through the walls, she heard restless movement in another room. Footsteps pacing, stopping, resuming. The sound of a man unable to find peace, even in his own home. Elena closed her eyes and said a prayer for the veteran sitting alone with his ghost, keeping vigil over dreams that would never return. Tomorrow she would begin healing the people of Silver Creek Valley. Tonight she would guard her own secrets and hope that time might eventually make trust possible. Outside her window, the Montana wind sang through grass and pine, carrying promises as vast as the sky overhead. 3 weeks into her duty at Silver Creek Ranch, Elena had established routines that felt natural as breathing. Mornings in the medical facility treating injuries and illnesses. Afternoons visiting homesteads scattered across the valley. Evenings preparing medications while Gabriel worked on ranch accounts, both orbiting each other with careful politeness. But beneath the surface, tensions built like storm clouds on the horizon. Elena had quickly realized that Dr. Gabriel Whitmore was fighting battles on multiple fronts. The obvious one against guilt over his family's death. The less obvious but equally dangerous one against what appeared to be combat-related anxiety that could strike without warning, leaving him shaking and distant for hours. She'd found him one morning in the medical facility, sitting on the floor, with his back against the wall, staring at nothing while his hands trembled uncontrollably. "Gabriel," she'd said softly. "Artillery," he'd whispered. "Could have sworn I heard artillery fire, but it was just thunder." She'd sat with him until the episode passed, neither of them speaking about what it meant that a trained physician could be reduced to helplessness by the sound of distant storms. "He cannot continue like this," Santos confided one evening as they watched Gabriel disappear into the barn for the third time that night. "A man needs more than work and guilt to survive. Senor Gabriel, he punishes himself for things no mortal could control. What can we do? You could talk to him. You are the only one he listens to anymore. The only one who understands healing like he does." Elena found him that night in the medical facility, hunched over military medical texts by lamplight. The room was pristine, as always equipped better than most city hospitals. But there were signs of the man's private struggles. Medicines for anxiety kept in his personal kit. Books on combat trauma mixed with standard medical references. "Studying, she asked gently, researching new treatments for shock trauma responses in civilians versus soldiers." He gestured to the journals scattered around him. "If I'd understood then what I know now about psychological casualties, you could have saved them. Maybe, or maybe I would have failed them differently." He looked up at her, and Elena was struck by how young he seemed despite his 34 years. "Do you know what the worst part is, Elena?" She settled in the chair across from him. "Tell me." "The worst part is that I was fighting a war I didn't believe in when my family needed me most. Not because I was drafted, but because I chose military service over civilian practice. Because I thought duty to country mattered more than duty to family. And that choice cost them everything. While I was treating bullet wounds and shrapnel injuries, Isabella was holding Marcus as he burned with fever, begging God to bring his father home." His laugh was bitter as winter wind. The great Dr. Whitmore, who could save soldiers under enemy fire, couldn't save his own wife and child because he was too honorable to abandon his post. Elena's heart clenched. "Have you talked to anyone about this? A chaplain, another veteran? Anyone who understands? What would be the point? Nothing can change what happened. Nothing can bring them back." He rubbed his eyes tiredly. "But maybe I can prevent other families from suffering because their father was somewhere else when they needed him most. Is that what you're doing here, staying close to home?" "Trying to. Some days are better than others. Some nights," he gestured to the medical text, "some nights the guilt is louder than logic." Elena leaned forward. "In Denver, I treated many soldiers who came back changed from the frontier wars. Men who jumped at sudden sounds, who couldn't sleep, who blamed themselves for surviving when their friends didn't. Do you know what I learned? What guilt doesn't honor the dead, living well does. Using your skills to protect others does. Choosing healing over hiding does. And you think I should choose healing? I think you're already choosing it. Every day, every patient you save, every time you face your anxiety instead of running from it." Elena touched the edge of his desk, not quite reaching his hand. But I think you are carrying responsibility that doesn't belong to you. Doesn't it? His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I was their protector. I was supposed to keep them safe. You were a soldier following orders, not God. You couldn't have known about the fever outbreak. You couldn't have prevented what happened. But I could have been there. I could have made different choices. Elena was quiet for a long moment, listening to wind whistle through the eaves. Finally, she spoke. May I tell you something about the night Tomas and Sophia died? Gabriel nodded, suddenly alert. I was working late at Denver General. There had been a mining accident, and I was treating the survivors. The same mining accident that would later take my family. Her voice grew rough with old pain. If I'd gone home when my shift ended, if I'd insisted Tomas stay home the next day, instead of returning to the mine, they might still be alive. You blame yourself. Every day for 2 years. But blame and responsibility are different things, Gabriel. I was responsible for loving them, not for preventing corporate negligence that I had no way to predict. Gabriel was quiet so long Elena wondered if she'd pushed too hard. Then he reached across the desk and covered her hand with his. Will you help me? He asked quietly. Help you what? Learn to live with this. Learn to be the doctor I was before guilt made me weak. He looked around the medical facility at instruments and medicines and possibilities for saving lives. I want to honor Isabella and Marcus by being worthy of the life I still have. What would you need from me? Partnership. Someone who understands healing and can remind me why it matters. Someone who, he hesitated. Someone who doesn't think I'm broken beyond repair. Gabriel. Elena turned her hand palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. Everyone's broken in some way. The question is whether we let brokenness define us or motivate us. And if I have episodes, if the anxiety becomes too much, then we'll handle it together. Medicine isn't a profession for people who expect easy answers. They spent the next hour planning collaborative medical care for the Valley. Gabriel would handle surgery and complex trauma. Elena would manage routine care and family medicine. Together, they would train Santos and selected ranch hands in basic techniques, creating a network that could respond quickly to emergencies. There's something else, Gabriel said as they prepared to leave. Something you should know before you commit to working with me long-term. What? His expression grew troubled. My brother Vincent is scheduled to visit next month. He's a lawyer in Denver, and he has concerns about my mental state. What kind of concerns? The kind that could result in him petitioning to have me declared incompetent to manage my affairs. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Vincent believes I should sell the ranch, move to the city, rejoin civilized society, as he puts it. And you don't want to leave. This is where Isabella and Marcus lived and loved. This is where their memories are strongest. This is where I can do the most good. His expression hardened. But Vincent has legal training and financial resources. If he decides I'm unfit, he could have you committed or your property transferred to his management. Exactly. Having a qualified medical professional working with me demonstrating that I'm functional and contributing to society would help counter his arguments. Elena studied his face carefully. Is that why you hired me, to help prove your competence? It started that way, Gabriel admitted, but it's become something more. You've reminded me that healing is possible, that I can be more than my worst moments. And if Vincent still objects, then I'll fight him, but I'd rather do it with a partner than alone. Elena thought about the children as she'd begun treating families who depended on her care. About Gabriel himself, wounded but decent, carrying burdens that would crush lesser men. About the possibility of building something meaningful from shared losses. I'll stand with you, she said simply. Even if it means conflict, Vincent can be persuasive. Then we'll be more persuasive. Truth has a way of winning eventually. They shook hands on it, but when their skin touched, Elena felt warmth race up her arm. Gabriel must have felt it too, because he held her hand longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. Thank you, he said softly, for seeing past the broken parts. Everyone deserves a chance at healing, Gabriel. Even people who've forgotten how to forgive themselves. 2 weeks later, Elena was returning from delivering a baby at the Henderson farm when she spotted a dust cloud approaching Silver Creek Ranch. Even from a distance, the rider seemed purposeful, official. the kind of men who brought complications wherever they went. She urged her horse faster, reaching the ranch yard just as 5 men dismounted. The leader was well-dressed in an expensive suit, handsome in a cold way that reminded Elena uncomfortably of mining company executives. His companions looked like hired professionals, not gunmen, but men accustomed to enforcing authority through legal rather than violent means. Vincent, Gabriel said, emerging from the main house. His voice was carefully controlled, but Elena could see tension in every line of his body. Gabriel. Vincent Whitmore's smile was sharp as a blade. You're looking better than I expected. Rural life seems to agree with you. It suits me fine. Does it? I've heard interesting reports about your activities. Hiring nurses, playing doctor, again, pretending the war never happened. Vincent's gaze swept the ranch buildings, clearly assessing their value. Some might call that progress. Others might wonder if you are compensating for instability. Elena dismounted quietly, staying close enough to hear while trying to remain unobtrusive. Something about Vincent made her skin crawl, though she couldn't identify exactly why. What I do on my own land is my business, Gabriel replied. Is it? As your older brother and the executor of our parents' estate, I have legitimate concerns about your judgment. Your isolation, your apparent inability to move past Isabella and Marcus's deaths, these episodes you've been having. What episodes? Vincent pulled out a folder, extracted several documents. I have reports from Dr. Patterson and Copper Ridge about your condition. Anxiety attacks, erratic behavior requests for medications typically prescribed for severe psychological disturbance. Elena's blood chilled. Those medications were standard treatment for combat trauma, but Vincent was making them sound like evidence of mental incompetence. I'm managing my condition appropriately, Gabriel said. Are you? Then why do you need a live-in nurse? Why are you isolated on this ranch instead of practicing medicine properly in a city where your work could be supervised? And who is this nurse? Vincent turned toward Elena, his smile widening unpleasantly. You must be the famous Miss Morales. The way he said her name made it sound like an accusation. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. I provide medical care to ranch families and surrounding communities. I'm sure you do. Vincent's tone suggested something sordid. Tell me, Miss Morales, has my brother shared with you the full details of his military service? Vincent, Gabriel's voice carried warning. Oh, but she should know, shouldn't she? If she's going to be working so intimately with you, she should understand exactly what kind of man she's supporting. What are you implying? Elena demanded. Vincent pulled more documents from his folder. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Dr. Gabriel Whitmore was discharged from military service under circumstances that remain classified, but I have reason to believe involved questions about his psychological fitness for duty. Gabriel went pale. That discharge was honorable, and you know it. Was it? I have testimony suggesting otherwise. Reports of incidents that raise serious questions about your judgment under pressure. Vincent stepped closer to Elena. Miss Morales, did you know my brother might have been responsible for civilian casualties during his last military engagement? That there are questions about whether he followed proper medical protocols during combat situations. That's enough, Elena said sharply. Is it? You seem intelligent. Do you really want to tie your professional reputation to a man who might be investigated for wartime conduct violations? Elena looked at Gabriel and saw devastation in his eyes. Whatever Vincent was claiming, true or false, it was hitting its mark. The careful progress Gabriel had made toward accepting his past was crumbling under this new assault. What do you want, Vincent? She asked quietly. I want what's best for my brother. I want him to sell this ranch, move to Denver, where he can receive proper medical care and resolve these legal complications before they destroy what's left of the Whitmore name. And if he refuses, Vincent's smile was sharp enough to cut, then the relevant military and civilian authorities will receive full reports about Dr. Gabriel Whitmore's fitness to practice medicine, his mental state, and the circumstances that led to his discharge from service. You bastard, Gabriel whispered. I'm your brother trying to save you from yourself. Sell the ranch, Gabriel. Get help. Let me handle the complications you have created. Elena watched Gabriel struggle, saw him weighing his love for the ranch against fear of exposure, his commitment to healing others against the terror of having his past dragged through legal proceedings. I need time to think, Gabriel said finally. You have 24 hours. After that, I file reports and begin proceedings to have you declared mentally incompetent. Vincent folded his documents carefully. Miss Morales, perhaps you could help my brother see reason. He mounted his horse companions following suit. One day, Gabriel, don't make this harder than necessary. They rode away, leaving Elena and Gabriel standing in the ranch yard surrounded by Santos and several hands who'd emerged to witness the confrontation. The careful peace they'd built over the past weeks lay in ruins around them. Gabriel, Elena said gently, don't. He turned away, shoulders rigid with pain. Vincent's right. I am unstable. I am dangerous, and you shouldn't tie your future to mine. That's fear talking, not truth. Is it? Maybe there are things about my military service that I've buried so deep I can't remember them clearly. Maybe I did make mistakes that got people killed. Maybe Vincent's doing everyone a favor. Elena watched him walk toward the house, saw him disappear into his study where medical books and memories waited to torment him. Around them, ranch hands dispersed quietly, but doubt lingered in their faces. That night, Elena sat in her room, staring out at stars scattered across the Montana sky. Tomorrow, Gabriel would have to choose between his ranch and his reputation, between fighting his brother's accusations and accepting defeat. And Elena would have to decide whether to reveal her own dangerous secret, the documents hidden in her room that could destroy Vincent's credibility if she was brave enough to use them. Through the wall, she heard restless pacing from Gabriel's room, the sound of a man wrestling with demons, both real and imagined. Elena closed her eyes and made her choice. Sometimes healing required more than medicine. Sometimes it required fighting for people who'd forgotten how to fight for themselves. Tomorrow would bring whatever consequences it brought. Tonight, she would prepare for the most dangerous gamble of her life. Elena woke to the sound of Gabriel pacing in the hallway outside her door. Through the thin walls, she could hear his restless footsteps. 3 steps toward the stairs, pause 5 steps back toward his room, pause, repeat. The pattern of a man whose mind wouldn't let him rest. She found him in the kitchen before dawn, sitting at the table with coffee that had gone cold hours ago. His hands shook slightly as he held the cup, and dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd spent the night wrestling with impossible choices. How long since you slept? She asked gently. Time doesn't matter when you're trying to decide between surrender and destruction. Gabriel looked up at her, and Elena was struck by how defeated he seemed. Vincent's deadline is this afternoon. I need to make a choice. And what are you thinking? I'm thinking maybe he's right. Maybe I am too broken to make good decisions. Maybe the people of this valley would be better served by someone more stable. Elena poured herself coffee and sat across from him. Is that what you really believe? I don't know what I believe anymore. Vincent has resources, connections, documentation I can't fight. If there are questions about my military service, if there are incidents I've buried, Gabriel, look at me. He met her eyes reluctantly. In 3 weeks, I've watched you save the life of a ranch hand who was gored by a bull. I've seen you deliver twins when Dr. Patterson couldn't make it through a blizzard. I've watched you comfort a dying man and help a grieving family find peace. Elena reached across the table, covered his shaking hands with hers. Those aren't the actions of an incompetent or unstable person. But if Vincent has evidence, then we'll examine that evidence carefully. Together. Gabriel was quiet for a moment. Elena, there is something I haven't told you about my military service. Something that might be relevant to whatever Vincent thinks he knows. I'm listening. My last assignment was at Fort Benton, but before that I was attached to a unit that did things civilians weren't supposed to know about. Reconnaissance behind enemy lines, treating casualties from raids that officially never happened. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. What kind of raids? The kind where military objectives took precedence over civilian safety. The kind where a field surgeon had to make decisions about who could be saved and who couldn't with limited supplies and enemy forces closing in. You had to prioritize patients based on survival probability. Sometimes. But there was one incident. Gabriel's voice grew rough. A settlement had been attacked. Mixed civilian and military casualties. I was triaging in a burning building when Apache warriors returned for a second assault. I had to choose between trying to save a critically wounded civilian child or stabilizing soldiers who could return to fighting. What did you do? I saved the soldiers. They survived and helped defend the settlement. The child died. Gabriel's hands were shaking harder now. It was the right tactical decision, but it haunts me every night. What if Vincent has documentation about that incident? What if he's found someone willing to testify that I deliberately let civilians die? Elena's mind raced. She understood now why Gabriel carried such guilt about Isabella and Marcus. In his mind, he'd already failed to save one child when military duty conflicted with medical ethics. Gabriel, that wasn't murder. That was battlefield triage under impossible circumstances. Try explaining that to a territorial judge who's never seen combat. Try making a civilian jury understand why a doctor would choose soldiers over children. Before Elena could respond, hoofbeats thundered into the ranch yard. Through the window, they could see riders approaching, but not Vincent's legal delegation. These were harder men, armed and dangerous. "Who are they?" Gabriel asked, moving to the window. Elena's blood turned to ice as she recognized the leader. Thomas Brennan, Harold's brother, and beside him, two of the hunters who'd pursued her from Denver. They'd found her. "Gabriel, I need to tell you something. Those men aren't here about your military service." "What do you mean?" Elena took a deep breath. "My name is Elena Morales, and I'm wanted by the Consolidated Mining Company for theft of documents that prove they caused the Silver Bell mine collapse through criminal negligence." Gabriel stared at her. "What documents?" "Evidence that company executives knew the mine was unstable, but kept it operating to meet quotas. Internal memos discussing acceptable casualty rates, financial records showing bribes paid to inspectors." Elena's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "My husband Tomas and daughter Sophia died when that mine collapsed, along with 41 other men. I took those documents to make sure someone paid for their murders. And these men are here to retrieve them. Or kill me to keep me quiet. Probably both." The riders had dismounted and were spreading out around the house with military precision. Elena counted 8 men, all armed, all moving with the confidence of professionals. "Where are the documents now?" Gabriel asked. "Hidden in my room." Elena met his eyes directly. "Gabriel, I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I brought this danger to your home. But those papers are the only justice my family will ever receive." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, processing this revelation. When he spoke, his voice was steady despite the circumstances. "Then we protect them, and we protect you. You don't understand. These aren't ordinary criminals. They're hired by men with enough money to buy judges, sheriffs, entire territories if necessary. Maybe, but this is my land, you're under my protection, and I'll be damned if I let corporate killers operate here without consequences." Before Elena could protest, someone pounded on the front door. "Dr. Whitmore," a voice called. "We need to speak with you about a fugitive you're harboring." Gabriel checked his sidearm, motioning Elena to stay back. "I'll handle this." "Gabriel, no. Let me go with them. It's me they want." "Not happening." Gabriel moved toward the door with the controlled calm of a man who'd faced combat before. "Stay behind me and be ready to run if this goes badly." He opened the door to find Thomas Brennan and 2 companions on the porch, weapons visible, but not yet drawn. "Mr. Brennan," Gabriel said politely, "you're on private property." "Dr. Whitmore, we're looking for a woman traveling under false papers. Mexican, calls herself Elena Morales. She's wanted for theft of valuable corporate documents." "And what makes you think such a person would be here?" "My brother Harold mentioned hiring her briefly before discovering her unsuitability." Thomas's smile was unpleasant. "We have reason to believe she fled here after being rejected." "I see. Do you have legal authority to search private property?" "We have authority from Consolidated Mining Company to recover stolen property and apprehend the thief." Gabriel's expression didn't change. "That's not legal authority, Mr. Brennan. That's corporate intimidation. Perhaps we should discuss this more privately, away from listening ears." Elena stepped into view behind Gabriel. Decision made. "I'm Elena Morales. What exactly are you accusing me of stealing?" Thomas's eyes lit with predatory satisfaction. "Miss Morales, at last. We've been looking for you for quite some time." "So I noticed. What documents are you claiming I took?" "Internal company correspondence that belongs to Consolidated Mining. Correspondence that was removed without authorization and is being used to make false allegations about company safety practices." "False allegations?" Elena's voice rose with anger. 43 men died when your mine collapsed because your company ignored safety warnings. The mine collapse was a tragic accident. The documents you stole have been taken out of context to create conspiracy theories. Gabriel stepped slightly forward, positioning himself between Elena and the men on his porch. Mr. Brennan, I think this conversation should continue through proper legal channels. If you have accusations to make, file them with territorial authorities. Dr. Whitmore, I'm afraid that's not possible. These documents concern sensitive business matters that require immediate resolution. Then I suggest you contact a lawyer. Thomas's facade of politeness began to slip. Doctor, you don't understand the situation. Consolidated mining has significant influence in this territory. Men who interfere with company business sometimes find themselves facing legal problems of their own. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. Miss Morales stole valuable property. Return it, and everyone can walk away from this situation without complications. Elena felt Gabriel tense beside her. She recognized the signs of a man calculating tactical options, weighing the odds of violence against the likelihood of peaceful resolution. The documents stay with me, Elena said firmly. They're evidence of criminal negligence that resulted in mass murder. Miss Morales, you're making this more difficult than necessary. And you're trespassing on private property to threaten witnesses to corporate crime. Thomas stepped back, hand moving toward his weapon. Last chance, Doctor. Turn over the thief and the stolen documents or face the consequences. The only thing I'm turning over, Gabriel said calmly, is my assessment that you should leave my property immediately. What happened next moved too fast for conscious thought. Thomas drew his pistol, clearly intending to end negotiations through force. Gabriel reacted with the speed of trained combat reflexes, throwing himself sideways to shield Elena while drawing his own weapon. But before either man could fire, new voices cut through the tension. Drop your weapons, Territorial Marshal. Marshal Webb rode into the ranch yard with a full posse, badges gleaming in morning sunlight. Thomas and his men found themselves suddenly surrounded by legitimate law enforcement. What's the meaning of this? Thomas demanded. Thomas Brennan, you're under arrest for armed trespassing, making terroristic threats, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Marshal Webb dismounted, hand resting on his weapon. Your men can surrender peacefully or join you in chains. This is a misunderstanding. We're here on legitimate business matters. Your business matters include bribing territorial officials and attempting to suppress evidence of criminal negligence. The marshal gestured to his men, who began disarming Brennan's crew. We've been investigating consolidated mining for months, Mr. Brennan. Miss Morales' stolen documents provided the final pieces we needed. Elena stared in shock. You know about the documents. Miss Morales, we've been hoping you'd surface for weeks. Those papers you took contain evidence of the largest corporate conspiracy in territorial history. But how did you know I was here? Marshal Webb smiled grimly. We didn't. We came here because Dr. Whitmore's brother Vincent filed complaints about his mental competency yesterday. Seems suspicious that two separate legal challenges would target the same ranch within 24 hours. Gabriel stepped forward. Vincent's involved with consolidated mining. Vincent Whitmore has been serving as their territorial legal counsel for 2 years. He's been systematically covering up safety violations, bribing inspectors, and suppressing evidence of company negligence. The marshal pulled out a warrant. He's also been using his position to threaten witnesses and manipulate legal proceedings for corporate benefit. Elena felt pieces clicking together in her mind. The timing of his visit wasn't coincidence. Vincent learned that Consolidated's enforcers had traced you to this ranch. He came here to discredit Gabriel preemptively, making sure no one would believe your testimony when it became public. Gabriel's expression hardened with understanding. He wasn't trying to protect me. He was protecting his corporate employers. Vincent Whitmore is currently in territorial custody, along with 3 consolidated mining executives and 6 territorial officials who accepted bribes. Marshal Webb looked at Elena seriously. Miss Morales, we need you to testify about what you witnessed and what those documents contain. Will I be charged with theft? You'll be granted immunity in exchange for testimony. The territorial government has a strong interest in prosecuting corporate murder. Elena felt tears of relief threatening. After months of running, hiding, fearing for her life, justice was finally possible. There's more, Marshal Webb continued. Dr. Whitmore, your military service records have been reviewed by federal authorities. The incidents your brother claimed to have evidence about were fabricated. Your discharge was not only honorable, but you're being recommended for civilian commendation for heroic medical service under extreme conditions. Gabriel swayed slightly as if the weight of vindication was too much of the process. The child you had to prioritize during triage, the marshal continued, the family survived and because of medical care you arranged before being forced to evacuate. Your tactical decisions saved both military and civilian lives. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in the Silver Creek Ranch Medical Facility, organizing supplies while Gabriel finished treating a ranch hand's broken arm. Outside, she could hear Santos directing repairs to fence lines damaged in recent storms. The documents she'd carried for so long were now in territorial custody, serving as primary evidence in criminal proceedings against Consolidated Mining. Vincent Whitmore faced charges of conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The company executives responsible for the Silver Bell mine disaster would finally face trial for mass murder. Elena Gabriel appeared in the doorway, no longer hesitant about sharing the medical space. Mrs. Rodriguez's baby is coming early. Are you ready? Always. She gathered her birthing kit, but before they could leave, Gabriel caught her hand. Elena, there was something I need to say. What? Vincent was wrong about almost everything, but he was right about one thing. I am damaged by what I've experienced. I do have episodes where the past overwhelms the present. I will probably always struggle with anxiety and guilt. Elena's heart clenched. Gabriel, but I'm also learning that damage doesn't mean worthless. That struggling doesn't mean failing. That some wounds heal stronger than the original skin. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I love you, Elena Morales, not despite your secrets or your courage, but because of everything that makes you who you are. I love you too, she whispered. All of you. The heroic parts and the wounded parts and everything in between. Then will you stay, not as my employee, but as my partner? Help me build something that honors both our losses while creating something new. Are you asking me to marry you, Dr. Whitmore? Gabriel smiled, and Elena saw the man he'd been before war and loss carve lines around his eyes. I'm asking if you'll take a chance on a broken soldier who's learning that healing happens in community, not isolation. Elena's answer was a kiss that tasted like redemption and felt like coming home. 6 months later, Gabriel Whitmore and Dr. Elena Valdez Whitmore ran the most respected medical practice in Montana Territory. Their ranch had become a healing center where people came not just for physical treatment, but for proof that broken things could be made whole again. And when Elena's morning sickness began, Gabriel's hands were steady as mountain stone, as he confirmed what they both hoped new life was growing from the ashes of old loss. The morning sickness hit Elena like a freight train at precisely 8 weeks, which was unfortunate timing since she was in the middle of treating a ranch hand's infected wound when nausea overwhelmed her. She barely made it outside before losing her breakfast in the rose bushes. Gabriel found her there, pale and shaking, wiping her mouth with his handkerchief. How long? He asked, gently settling beside her on the porch steps. 2 weeks of suspecting, 1 week of being certain. Elena leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I wanted to be sure before I told you. And how do you feel about it, really? Elena considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, the thought of carrying another child would have terrified her. The memory of losing Sophia still ached like a physical wound. But now, hopeful, she said finally. Scared, but hopeful. What about you? Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, and Elena felt familiar anxiety creep up her spine. What if he couldn't handle the prospect of another child to lose? What if the thought of becoming a father again triggered memories of Marcus that he couldn't bear? Terrified, he admitted. And more grateful than I have words for. Terrified because I lost one child already. Because I know how quickly love can become loss. Because part of me will always believe I don't deserve another chance at happiness. Elena turned to face him fully. And grateful because you've taught me that love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to remain open to joy even after experiencing devastating loss. Gabriel placed his hand over her still, flat stomach. This baby is proof that life continues, that healing is possible, that we can honor our dead by embracing the future they can't share with us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over mountains that had witnessed their transformation from broken strangers to healing partners to expectant parents. "There's something we should discuss," Gabriel said finally. "What? Your testimony in the consolidated mining trial starts next month. Travel to Denver, weeks of legal proceedings confronting the people responsible for Tomas and Sophia's deaths." His voice grew concerned. "That's going to be emotionally exhausting under the best circumstances. With morning sickness and pregnancy fatigue." Elena had been dreading this conversation. The trial was crucial, not just for justice for her family, but for the 41 other families who'd lost fathers, sons, brothers in the mine collapse. But the thought of spending weeks in courtrooms facing corporate lawyers who would try to paint her as a hysterical widow seeking money made her stomach churn. "I have to testify. Those documents I stole are meaningless without someone to authenticate them and explain their significance." "I know, and I'll be with you every step of the way." Gabriel's hand covered hers. "But Elena promised me something. If the stress becomes too much, if the pregnancy complications develop, you'll put your health first and let Consolidated Mining escape justice. And trust that justice doesn't depend solely on your sacrifice. There are other witnesses, other evidence. The territorial government has enough to prosecute even without your testimony." Elena knew he was right, but the thought of backing down felt like betraying Tomas and Sophia all over again. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Santos rode into the yard leading two men Elena didn't recognize, one in an expensive suit that marked him as a lawyer, the other wearing a territorial marshal's badge. "Dr. Whitmore," the lawyer called as he dismounted. "I'm James Morrison, territorial prosecutor. I need to speak with you and Miss Morales about the upcoming trial." They gathered in the ranch house parlor, Elena and Gabriel sitting close together, while Morrison spread legal documents across the coffee table. "Miss Morales, I'll be direct. Consolidated Mining has hired the most expensive legal team in the territory. They're going to attack your credibility, your motives, your mental state. They'll claim you stole those documents for financial gain, that you're a hysteric seeking to blame the company for what was clearly a mining accident." "Let them try," Elena said firmly. "They'll also investigate every aspect of your life, your marriage, your medical training, your activities since arriving in Montana." Morrison's expression grew serious. "Is there anything in your background that could be used to discredit you?" Elena felt Gabriel tense beside her. They'd never fully discussed the details of how she'd come to be at Copper Ridge Station that day running from corporate enforcers. "I was traveling under false papers when I arrived here," she said quietly. "I'd been using assumed names to avoid detection while I figured out how to make the documents public." "What kind of false papers?" "Marriage correspondence. I was impersonating a mail-order bride to Harold Brennan." Elena's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. It seemed like effective cover. Morrison made notes. "Anything else?" Elena looked at Gabriel, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I may have acquired additional evidence during my time working for Consolidated Mining." "What do you mean acquired?" "Before I took the documents about the mine collapse, I copied financial records showing other safety violations, other bribes, other incidents where people died because of company negligence." The marshal leaned forward intently. "How much additional evidence are we talking about?" "Enough to prove that the Silver Bell disaster wasn't an isolated incident. Enough to show a pattern of criminal negligence going back 5 years." Morrison and the marshal exchanged looks. "Miss Morales," Morrison said carefully, "where is this additional evidence?" "Hidden, safe, but accessible if needed for prosecution. We need everything you have. The territorial government is prepared to file additional charges, but we need complete documentation." Elena stood moving to the window where she could see mountains stretching toward horizons that had once seemed impossibly distant. When she'd first arrived at Silver Creek Ranch, she'd been running from the pestes. Now she was preparing to confront it head-on. "There's something else you should know," she said without turning around. "I'm pregnant." The silence behind her was profound. "How pregnant?" Morrison asked finally. 8 weeks. "Miss Morales, I have to ask, are you prepared to testify while dealing with pregnancy symptoms The defense will try to use any sign of physical distress to suggest emotional instability. Gabriel stood, moving to Elena's side. She'll testify when she's ready and able, not before, bum. Dr. Whitmore, this trial is scheduled to begin in 3 weeks. We can't delay indefinitely. Then you'll work around her needs, Gabriel said firmly. Elena's health and our baby's safety take priority over legal scheduling. Elena turned from the window, decision crystallizing in her mind. I'll testify, but I want certain conditions. What conditions? I want Gabriel with me throughout the proceedings. I want medical support available in case of complications. And I want protection for our ranch and our people while we're gone. Morrison nodded. All reasonable. Anything else? I want every family who lost someone in that mine collapse to be present in the courtroom. I want the jury to see the faces of the people Consolidated Mining murdered through negligence. 3 weeks later, Elena sat in a Denver courtroom wearing a dark blue dress that concealed her growing pregnancy while projecting professional competence. Gabriel sat in the gallery behind her close enough that she could draw strength from his presence. The prosecutor had spent 2 days presenting evidence, financial records, showing cost-cutting measures that compromised safety engineering reports that were ignored, internal memos discussing acceptable casualty rates for mining operations. Now Elena was on the witness stand facing a jury of 12 men who would decide whether corporate executives would face justice for mass murder. Miss Morales, the prosecutor, began. Please tell the court how you came to be in possession of the documents that form the foundation of this case. Elena straightened her spine, feeling the weight of 43 families watching from the gallery. I was working as a nurse at Denver General Hospital when my husband Tomas and daughter Sophia died in the Silver Bell mine collapse. Tomas was a mining engineer as Sophia was 5 years old. They were visiting the mine site when the collapse occurred. And what led you to investigate Consolidated Mining? The company claimed the collapse was unforeseeable, an act of God that no one could have prevented. But Tomas had mentioned safety concerns in the weeks before his death. He'd submitted reports about structural instability that were apparently ignored. Elena's voice grew stronger as she continued. I wanted to understand why my family died, so I applied for a clerical position with Consolidated Mining and spent 3 months copying documents that proved the company knew the mine was dangerous. The defense attorney objected repeatedly, but Elena's testimony was methodical, devastating, and completely credible. She explained each document, provided context for the technical reports, and demonstrated how company executives had consciously chosen profits over human lives. When the defense attorney cross-examined her, Elena was ready. Miss Morales, isn't it true that you stole these documents because you were seeking financial compensation? I stole these documents because I wanted the men who killed my family to face justice. You were emotionally distraught, weren't you? Grief-stricken and not thinking clearly? I was grieving, yes, but I was thinking very clearly about preventing other families from suffering what mine had endured. Miss Morales, how do we know you didn't fabricate or alter these documents to support your accusations? Elena looked directly at the jury. Because territorial marshals seized identical documents directly from Consolidated Mining's offices. Because independent experts have verified their authenticity. Because 3 company executives have already confessed rather than face trial. The defense attorney pressed harder, attacking her character, her motives, her mental state. But Elena remained calm, professional, unshakable. Every attempt to rattle her only made her testimony more compelling. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, Elena felt lighter than she had in 2 years. The truth was finally public. Justice was finally possible. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts, criminal negligence resulting in death, conspiracy to suppress evidence, bribery of public officials, violation of territorial safety regulations. Consolidated Mining's executives received sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years in territorial prison. The company was fined amounts that would force it into bankruptcy, ensuring that the families of victims would receive substantial compensation. But for Elena, the most important moment came when Tomas's elderly father approached her outside the courthouse. Mija, he said, tears streaming down his weathered face. Gracias. You have given us justice. You have honored our dead. That evening, Elena and Gabriel sat in their Denver hotel room, finally allowing themselves to process what they'd accomplished. How do you feel? Gabriel asked, settling beside her on the bed. exhausted, relieved, grateful. Elena leaned against his shoulder and ready to go home. Home to Silver Creek Ranch. Home to our life together. Our work, our people, our future. Gabriel placed his hand over her stomach where their child grew surrounded by love instead of loss. This baby is going to grow up knowing that justice is possible, that courage matters, that broken hearts can heal, and that love is stronger than fear. They traveled back to Montana, slowly stopping frequently to rest and ensure Elena's comfort. By the time they reached Silver Creek Ranch, spring had arrived in the valley. Wildflowers bloomed and meadow streams ran full with snowmelt, and everything spoke of renewal and fresh beginnings. Santos met them at the ranch gate with news that the medical practice had flourished in their absence, that neighboring families had rallied to help maintain the ranch, that the community they'd built was stronger than ever. 6 months later, Elena gave birth to twin daughters, Isabella Sofia, named for Gabriel's lost wife, and Elena's lost daughter, and Carmen Esperanza, named for hope itself. Gabriel's hands were steady as mountain stone as he helped deliver his own children, tears streaming down his face as he placed his daughters in Elena's arms. "Look what we've built," Elena whispered, watching Gabriel hold Isabella while Carmen nestled against her breast. "Look what love can create from loss." Outside their bedroom window, the Montana wind sang through grass and pine, carrying promises as vast as the sky overhead. They had faced their demons, fought for justice, and discovered that healing was possible when brave hearts chose love over fear. In the medical facility downstairs, instruments waited to save lives. In the ranch yard, cattle grazed peacefully while horses ran free. In the kitchen, Santos's wife Maria prepared dinner for a household that had grown from two wounded souls to a family strong enough to change the world. And in the nursery Gabriel had built with his own hands, two baby girls slept peacefully, surrounded by love that would teach them courage, inspire them to fight for justice, and remind them that the best revenge against loss is building something beautiful in its place. Elena closed her eyes and said a prayer of gratitude for the train that had brought her to Montana, the man who had seen past her secrets to her heart, and the love that had healed wounds she thought would never stop bleeding. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the deepest losses. Sometimes two broken souls can create something whole. Sometimes justice delayed is not justice denied, but justice refined by patience and strengthened by courage. Love has the power to heal the deepest wounds, to transform loss into purpose, and to create new life from the ashes of old dreams. Gabriel and Elena's story reminds us that true healing happens when we stop running from our pain and start fighting for our future. Their journey from strangers to partners to parents proves that love isn't about forgetting the past. It's about honoring it while building something better. If this story of justice and healing love touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional Western romances where broken hearts find wholeness. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between safety and justice? And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest tales from the American frontier, where courage and love always triumph over fear and corruption. Until next time, may your own love story be as enduring as the Rocky Mountains and as healing as mountain spring water. Remember, the strongest love grows not from easy circumstances, but from facing life's hardest challenges together. Vaya con Dios.